Tennessee's at-home learning series for literacy. Today's lesson is for all of our 7th graders out there, though anyone is welcome to tune in. This is the second lesson in this week's series. My name is Mrs. Alley, and I'm a 7th grade teacher in Tennessee schools. I'm so excited to be your teacher for this lesson. Welcome to my virtual classroom. If you didn't see our previous lesson, you can find it on www.tn.gov/education. You can still tune in to today's lesson if you haven't seen any of our others, but it might be more fun if you first go back and watch our previous lessons, since today we'll be talking about things we learned previously. Today we will be learning more about Edgar Allan Poe's poem, Annabel Lee. Before we get started, to participate fully in today's lesson, you will need a few things: paper, a pencil, a hard surface to write on, and your notes from the first lesson. Let's get started. Today, we will continue analyzing the poem Annabel Lee by thinking on a more contextual level with a focus on figurative language. So, last time we read the poem Annabel Lee by Edgar Allan Poe. Then we chatted about each stanza separately to understand what he was talking about. I think we were a little surprised that Poe had actually written a love poem. But as Poe can do, he took the love poem he wrote and still put a bit of a dark twist on it. Today, our goal is to think about how Poe uses structure to make a love poem so interestingly dark and, dare I say, a bit twisted. We'll begin by reviewing the poem and chatting a little about how poets can use language to make us feel a lot of different emotions. And then there will be time for you to practice on your own with my support as we look more deeply into Annabel Lee. Finally, I will assign you independent work you can complete after the video ends. To get started today, we're going to read through the poem. For those of you who watched the first lesson, please be sure to review your summaries as I read through it. If you don't have a summary, that's okay. Just listen closely and see if you can get the basic meaning of the poem. Ready? It was many and many a year ago, in a kingdom by the sea, that a maiden there lived, whom you may know by the name of Annabel Lee. And this maiden, she lived with no other thought than to love and be loved by me. I was a child, and she was a child, in this kingdom by the sea. But we loved with a love that was more than love, I and my Annabel Lee. With a love that the winged seraphs of heaven coveted her and me. And that was the reason that long ago, in this kingdom by the sea, a wind blew out of a cloud, chilling my beautiful Annabel Lee, so that her high-born kinsmen came and bore her away from me, to shut her up in a sepulchre in this kingdom by the sea. The angels, not half so happy in heaven, went envying her and me. Yes, that was the reason, as all men know, in this kingdom by the sea, that the wind came out of the cloud by night, chilling and killing my Annabel Lee. But our love, it was stronger by far than the love of those who were older than we, of many far wiser than we. And neither the angels in heaven above, nor the demons down under the sea can ever dissever my soul from the soul of the beautiful Annabel Lee. For the moon never beams without bringing me dreams of the beautiful Annabel Lee. And the stars never rise, but I feel the bright eyes of the beautiful Annabel Lee. And so all the night tide, I lie down by the side of my darling, my life, and my bride, in her sepulchre there by the sea, in her tomb by the sounding sea. Well, every time I read this, I have a feeling inside that kind of tears me in two. On one hand, I love how deeply he feels for Annabel Lee. On the other hand, I'm so sad because he lost her and feels like he'll never find another. I guess, though, that's what makes the poem so awesome, right? So as I mentioned before, we're going to think more deeply about why the words and literary devices that Poe chooses to use makes the whole tone of the poem so effective. Let's get started. First, let's take out that pencil and piece of paper. I've got mine. If you watched the last lesson, take out the notes that you started, and we're going to add to them. As we discuss this poem, it would probably be a good idea to take notes. Your assignment at the end of this lesson will revolve around everything that we talk about today. It was many and many a year ago, in a kingdom by the sea, that a maiden there lived whom you may know by the name of Annabel Lee. And this maiden, she lived with no other thought than to love and be loved by me. Let's talk about the mood and tone at the beginning of this poem. Remember, the mood is how we feel. The tone is how the narrator feels towards the subject. So what do you think? What's the mood at the beginning of this poem? I would have to agree. I think the mood is pretty upbeat, even happy. It actually starts out like a lot of fairy tales end, huh? Two people are in complete love with one another. What could be better than that? What about the tone? At this point, how does our poet feel about what's going on? Right again. I think it's obvious that the poet feels good about where they are in their relationship. I mean, he describes Annabel Lee as having no other thought than to love him and be loved by him. I don't know about you, but I'm thinking that's a pretty good feeling. I'd write this down in your notes, kind of like this. On your paper, I would write the words structure shift. And then next to it, write mood and tone is positive. In fact, whenever we talk about the structure and how it shifts, we'll write down where it takes place and what the mood and tone are so you can apply it to your assignment later. Now, we need to be totally aware of how he has structured the poem, because the structure is one way he's able to manipulate our emotions. Let's jump in to this stanza. The angels not half so happy in heaven when envying her and me. Yes, that was the reason, as all men know, in this kingdom by the sea, that the wind came out of a cloud by night, chilling and killing my Annabel Lee. Wow, so these two probably teenagers are totally in love. Everything is going perfectly. Then what happens in the middle of the poem? Yes, Annabel Lee dies. I see that in the last line of the poem, that the wind came out of a cloud by night, chilling and killing my Annabel Lee. The angels, not half so happy in heaven, went envying her and me. Yes, that was the reason, as all men know, in this kingdom by the sea, that the wind came out of a cloud by night, chilling and killing my Annabel Lee. Now, what happens to both the mood and tone here in the middle of the poem? Yes, indeed. I might use the word dark or even sad. So here's what I would like you to think about for a minute. What kind of effect does the sudden change in the mood and tone of the poem have on us as a reader And what line or lines can you point out that really cause that change? I totally agree. It's almost like a shock, isn't it? I mean, everything seems to be all right, and then suddenly we find out that Annabel Lee is dead. In fact, I use the line that talks about her death as the major changing point for me. Think for a minute how that shock and how quick the mood shifts makes you feel about the poem. So now I have a real sense of being uneasy. Don't you? I mean, if the tone and mood can change that quickly, what's next? But our love, it was stronger by far than the love of those who were older than we, of many far wiser than we. And neither the angels in heaven above, nor the demons down under the sea, can ever dissever my soul from the soul of the beautiful Annabel Lee. Can you try to paraphrase that for me, please? Remember, when you paraphrase, you put the author's words into your own. My words for this would be, even though she has died, our souls can never be separated because we love each other so much. Yet another quick shift in the tone and mood, right? Let's read that one more time. But our love, it was stronger by far than the love of those who were older than we, of many far wiser than we. And neither the angels in heaven above, nor the demons down under the sea, can ever dissever my soul from the soul of the beautiful Annabel Lee. What does the tone and mood shift do to here? Yep, we're back to, "Aw, that's so sweet." She might have died, but still, love conquers all. What an awesome positive thought. But then, for the moon never beams without bringing me dreams of the beautiful Annabel Lee, in her sepulchre there by the sea, in her tomb by the side of the sea. Wow. See if you can paraphrase that. Remember that a sepulchre is another word for tomb. Awesome job. I wrote, I will never forget her as long as the moon shines, laying in her tomb by the side of the ocean. Man, Poe, just when you think the tone is beginning to change for the better, he goes even darker, doesn't he? Now, I'd like you to do a couple of things for me. First, I want you to write in your notes the effect that Poe's structure of mood and tone shifts have on you as a reader. Let me read that one more time before you start writing in your notes. I want you to write in your notes the effect that Poe's structure of mood and tone shifts have on you as a reader. Let's do that. Okay. Next, I would like you to figure out that structure and write that in your notes. You'll be using that structure for your assignment in just a few minutes. One more time. I would like you to figure that structure out and write that in your notes. You'll be using that structure for your assignment in a few minutes. Good. What did you say? I said the structure makes my mood swing from one end to the other of the spectrum. I go from feeling pretty good about what's going on to suddenly feeling horrible. Because that shift is so quick, it hits me in a much harder way than if I was eased slowly into it. How about the structure? I noticed that it went from a tone of being positive, we're so in love, to a very negative tone, Annabel is dead, to a positive tone again, we'll always love each other, to yet again a very negative tone, I'll always think of her lying dead in the tomb. Great job. It was many and many a year ago in a kingdom by the sea. If you were tuned in last time, we said that it reminded us of the way a fairy tale begins. You know, once upon a time in a land far, far away. Well, let's carry the whole fairy tale comparison a little further. Notice that when you read Annabel Lee, the words love, loved, and kingdom is used. Some of them quite a lot. Why do you think that is? I agree. Whenever you read fairy tales, all of those things continuously show up. Also, think about the rhythm that is created by the poem. It's almost a sing-song tune, isn't it? For example, and this maiden, she lived with no other thought than to love and be loved by me. I was a child and she was a child in this kingdom by the sea. How does that sing-song nature of the poem make you feel? The sound of the words and the way they rhyme kind of makes me relaxed as I bounce from one word to another. Kind of like when you're reading a fairy tale, we know will end happily. So it's obvious that Poe is kind of patterning this after fairy tales, right? I have one more thing I would like for you to think about. That's the whole idea of a fairy tale. Think about Cinderella, for example. Keep this story in mind. We're going to use it to compare. Again, we're looking at the structure of the poem. So be sure to write all of this in your notes so that you can remember it and use it for your assignment later. I want you to write in your notes, what is Cinderella's life like at the very beginning of the story? Correct. I think it's obvious it starts out with kind of a bleak tone, doesn't it? She's used as nothing more than a maid. Her stepsisters mistreat her, and her stepmother is simply awful. So I would write bleak at the beginning in your notes. How does the story end? Correct again. Cinderella finds her prince and lives happily ever after. Now, let's look at Annabel Lee thinking about the structure of a fairy tale. At the top of your notes, please write fairy tale structure. You'll write everything we talk about in this section. What is the mood and tone at the beginning of the poem? Yes, I would say that it is positive. I mean, they're both so in love. So I'll write positive in my notes under my heading. What is the mood and tone at the end of the poem? Things are pretty dark at the end, huh? So I'm going to write dark on the next line in my notes. It's almost as if Poe is telling us a fairy tale, but it's turned upside down. Let's move on to our independent practice. I want to have a little fun for your independent work today. If you were watching last time, remember I asked you to think of a hobby that you simply love to do, even if it's sleeping. If you weren't watching before, please do that now. Write down one thing that you love to do. Now, what I would like you to do is to tell the story of you and your love for that hobby. But do it using the fairy tale structure we discussed Poe used in Annabel Lee. Remember, the important things to keep in mind is your structure should start with a positive tone, then it should move into a darker tone, lighten the tone up again, and finally finish with a very dark tone. I'm going to say that one more time because it's really important you keep it in mind in order to make sure that you are structuring the poem you're writing about your love for the particular hobby in the same way that Edgar Allan Poe structured Annabel Lee. Make sure to keep in mind to start with a positive tone, and then you're going to move into a darker tone. Then you're going to lighten the tone up again, and then you're going to finish your poem off with a very dark tone. Remember, these lessons are posted on www.tn.gov/education if you need to revisit. Also remember, you're turning a fairy tale upside down. Be sure to pattern your rhyme scheme after that of the poem. Force your reader into that sing-song sound when they read your poem aloud. Finally, share with someone and have them read it aloud to you so you can hear it. Maybe even have everyone in your house write one about their hobby and have a poetry slam night. You can even tape it and put it on the internet. Who knows? You could go viral. Good luck and have fun. I enjoyed working with you understanding the structure in the poem Annabel Lee today. Thank you for inviting me into your home. I look forward to seeing you for our next lesson in Tennessee's At Home Learning Series. Bye.